The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop outside the dusty trading post, and Rebecca Vance tumbled forward, her carpetbag spilling across the floor as the driver shouted something unintelligible about a broken axle. She pressed her palm against the worn leather seat, steadying herself as the New Mexico heat pressed through the windows like a physical force. It was 1878, and she had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Philadelphia to this God-forsaken stretch of desert called Hachita, following nothing but a worn letter from a lawyer and the faint hope that her late uncle's property might offer her something resembling a future. The other passengers filed out, and Rebecca gathered her scattered belongings, her fingers trembling slightly as she stuffed a book of pressed flowers back into her bag. She had turned 23 just last month, alone in a boarding house room while her landlady knocked impatiently for overdue rent. The teaching position she had held for 2 years vanished when the school board discovered she had been supplementing her meager income by writing sensational stories for the penny dreadfuls. Apparently, unmarried women were meant to be paragons of virtue, not authors of tales featuring gunfights and forbidden romance. She stepped down from the coach, squinting against the brilliant afternoon sun. Hachita was barely a town, just a collection of weathered buildings clustered along a rutted road. A general store, a saloon, what might have been a boarding house, and several structures she could not immediately identify. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and imposing against the cloudless sky. The air smelled of dust, creosote, and something she could not quite place, something wild and untamed. "You Miss Vance?" A stocky man with a silver badge pinned to his vest approached, his boots kicking up small clouds with each step. "I am," Rebecca replied, setting down her largest trunk with a grunt. The driver was already examining the damaged axle with 2 other men, their conversation punctuated by creative profanity. "Sheriff Dalton, got word you might be coming through. Your uncle's property is about 6 miles northeast of here. Not much of a ride, but it is getting late. You might want to wait until morning, get a room at Mrs. Patterson's." He gestured toward the building she had identified as a boarding house. Rebecca followed his gaze, then looked back at the sheriff. "Is the property occupied?" "Not exactly." Dalton shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "Your uncle died 8 months back. Heart gave out while he was checking his water lines. Place has been sitting empty since. A few squatters tried moving in, but Lucas Nash ran them off." "Lucas Nash owns the ranch adjacent to your uncle's plot." The Nash spread is one of the biggest operations in this part of the territory. Lucas is the oldest son, runs most of the day-to-day operations now that his father is ailing. Dalton scratched his jaw. "He is a fair man, keeps his word. Said he would watch over the property until family showed up to claim it." Rebecca absorbed this information, her mind already working through the implications. She had never met her Uncle Jeremiah, only knew him through her mother's bitter stories about the brother who abandoned civilization for the frontier. When the lawyer's letter arrived informing her that she had inherited his property, she had imagined a small house, perhaps a few acres. She had not expected complications. "I would like to see the property today," she said firmly. "Before dark, if possible." Dalton looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. "I will get my horse. You can ride behind me, but we will have to leave your luggage here until we can send a wagon." "That is acceptable." 20 minutes later, Rebecca found herself clinging to the sheriff's waist as his horse picked its way along a narrow trail. She had ridden exactly 3 times in her life, all on gentle mares in Fairmount Park, and this experience bore no resemblance to those leisurely outings. The horse moved with purpose, navigating rocks and scrub brush while she tried not to imagine tumbling off into a cactus. They crested a small rise, and Dalton pointed ahead. "That is your uncle's place." The house was smaller than she had hoped, a simple adobe structure with a covered porch and several outbuildings in various states of disrepair. But there was something appealing about the way it sat in a small valley, protected from the worst of the wind. A line of cottonwood trees suggested water somewhere nearby. "And that," Dalton continued, gesturing to the west, "is the Nash Ranch." Rebecca turned and felt her breath catch. Where her uncle's property seemed humble and practical, the Nash spread was impressive. A large ranch house dominated the landscape, surrounded by corrals, barns, and bunkhouses. Even from this distance, she could see cattle moving across the range and several riders on horseback, though they were too far away to make out clearly. They approached her uncle's house, and Dalton helped her dismount. Her legs felt unsteady after the ride, and she held onto the saddle for a moment to regain her balance. The sheriff tied his horse to a post that looked barely sturdy enough to hold it and walked to the front door. "It is not locked," he said, pushing it open. "Not much point out here. Anyone determined to get in will manage it regardless." The interior was dim and smelled of dust and disuse. Rebecca stepped inside, her eyes slowly adjusting. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large fireplace along one wall and a table with 2 chairs near the window. A door led to what she assumed was a bedroom, and another to some kind of storage area. It was sparse, but it was clean, or had been before 8 months of neglect. "Water comes from a spring about a quarter-mile north," Dalton explained. "Your uncle had a decent setup, kept a few chickens, a milk cow. They are all gone now, of course. The land is not much good for crops, but there is decent grazing if you have livestock." Rebecca walked slowly through the space, trailing her fingers along the rough-hewn table. She had no experience with livestock, no knowledge of springs or grazing land. She had spent her entire life in a city, where water came from a pump in the yard and food came from markets. What was she supposed to do with this place? "Most folks would sell," Dalton said quietly, reading her thoughts. "I am sure Lucas Nash would make you a fair offer. He has been looking to expand his water access, and your uncle's spring would solve a lot of his problems during dry years." "Is that why he protected the property?" "Because he wants to buy it, probably part of it," Dalton admitted. "But Lucas is not the type to cheat a woman out of her inheritance. He will offer you fair market value, and he will give you time to think on it." Rebecca turned to face the sheriff. "I appreciate the information, but I am not ready to make any decisions yet." "Fair enough." Dalton moved toward the door. "I need to get back before full dark. You should come with me, stay at Mrs. Patterson's until you figure out your next move. I will stay here tonight." "Miss Vance, I do not think that is wise. You do not have supplies, no lamp oil, no food, and you are alone." "I have been alone for quite some time, Sheriff. One more night will not make much difference." She softened her tone slightly. "I appreciate your concern, truly. But this is my property, and I would like to spend a night here, see how it feels." Dalton looked deeply unhappy, but did not argue further. "I will send someone out tomorrow with your luggage and some basic supplies. You need anything before then, the Nash Ranch is your closest neighbor. Just follow that line of fence posts west until you see the main house." After the sheriff left, Rebecca stood on the porch and watched the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. The sky transformed into something magnificent, streaks of orange and pink and deep purple spreading across the heavens. She had never seen colors like this in Philadelphia, where buildings blocked the view and coal smoke muted everything. She went back inside and began exploring more thoroughly. The bedroom contained a simple bed frame with no mattress. a wardrobe with a few of her uncle's clothes still hanging inside, and a small chest of drawers. She found a lantern with about an inch of oil remaining, which she lit carefully. The storage room held tools, some bags of dried beans that mice had gotten into, and a collection of items whose purpose she could only guess at. As darkness fell completely, the temperature dropped dramatically. Rebecca wrapped herself in her traveling cloak and sat in one of the chairs, watching shadows dance across the walls. She had spent the last of her money on the stagecoach ticket, carrying nothing but the hope that this inheritance might give her a fresh start. Now she sat in an empty house in the middle of nowhere, with no clear plan and no resources. She must have dozed off, because the sound of horse hooves startled her awake. The lamp had burned out, and moonlight streamed through the window, bright enough to cast everything in silver and shadow. The hoofbeats stopped outside and heavy footsteps crossed the porch. "Sheriff said you stayed out here." The voice was male, deep and rough-edged. "Wanted to make sure you were all right." Rebecca stood quickly, her heart hammering. "Who are you?" "Lucas Nash. I live on the ranch west of here." A pause. "I am coming in. Do not shoot me." "I do not have a gun," Rebecca said, which seemed like information she probably should not have shared. The door opened and a man stepped inside. The moonlight caught him in profile, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing dusty work clothes and a wide-brimmed hat. He carried a bundle in his arms, which he set on the table. "Brought you some supplies. Figured you might not have much." He pulled off his hat, and Rebecca could see his face better now. Strong features, a straight nose, eyes that might have been blue or gray in better light. A few days' worth of stubble covered his jaw. He looked to be in his late 20s, maybe 30. "That is very kind," Rebecca said carefully, "but you did not need to ride out here in the dark." "It is not that dark. Moon is near full." Lucas Nash moved to the fireplace and knelt down, examining the cold ashes. "You know how to build a fire, of course," Rebecca lied. He looked at her for a long moment, and she had the uncomfortable feeling he knew exactly how much she was bluffing. "I will get one started. Gets cold at night out here, even in summer. Winter will freeze you solid if you do not know what you are doing." He worked efficiently, arranging kindling and larger pieces of wood that he retrieved from a box beside the fireplace. Within minutes, flames began to lick upward, casting warm light through the room. Rebecca moved closer, grateful for the heat she had not realized she desperately needed. "The bundle has some food," Lucas said, standing and brushing off his hands. "Bread, cheese, dried beef, some eggs packed in cornmeal. There is coffee, too, and a pot to make it in. Should hold you until proper supplies can be brought out." "Thank you, Mr. Nash. I will repay you as soon as I am able." "No need." He settled his hat back on his head. "Your uncle was a good neighbor, helped me out more than once when I needed it. Figure I owe him this much. The sheriff said you have been keeping squatters off the property. Not much effort required. Most folks around here know better than to steal from a dead man. The few who do not just needed a reminder about property rights." He moved toward the door, then paused. "You planning to stay or sell?" "I have not decided." "When you do decide, come talk to me before you accept any offers. I will match or beat whatever anyone else proposes, and I will not cheat you on the water rights." "Why would you tell me that?" Rebecca asked. "Would it not be easier to let me accept a lower offer from someone else?" Lucas looked at her with something that might have been amusement. "Easier, maybe, but not right. You inherited this fair and square. You deserve to know what it is actually worth." He left before she could respond, the sound of his horse fading into the night. Rebecca stood by the fire, trying to process the strange encounter. Lucas Nash was not what she had expected from a cattle rancher. He had been courteous, respectful, and surprisingly honest about his intentions to purchase her property. In her experience, men usually tried to manipulate or intimidate women in business dealings. His straightforward approach was almost disconcerting. She opened the bundle he had brought and found everything he had promised, plus a small jar of honey and a handful of dried apples. Her stomach growled loudly, reminding her that she had not eaten since morning. She cut off a chunk of bread and cheese, savoring each bite. The food was simple but good, and she felt her energy returning. After eating, she fed more wood to the fire and settled back in the chair, pulling her cloak tight around her shoulders. Tomorrow she would need to make plans, figure out how to survive out here until she could decide what to do with the property. But tonight, she let herself simply exist in this strange new place, listening to the sounds of the desert night through the open window. The next morning arrived with brilliant sunshine streaming through every crack and gap in the walls. Rebecca woke stiff and uncomfortable, her neck protesting the night spent sleeping upright in a chair. She stood slowly, working out the kinks, and surveyed the house in daylight. It looked even more worn than it had the previous evening, but she could also see its potential. Fresh whitewash on the walls, some repairs to the shutters, a thorough cleaning, and it might actually be quite charming. She was attempting to figure out how to make coffee using the supplies Lucas had brought when she heard a wagon approaching. Moments later, Sheriff Dalton appeared with her luggage and a young Mexican woman who introduced herself as Carmen Ruiz. "I help clean houses in town," Carmen explained in accented but clear English. "Sheriff said you might need help getting settled. I can work 3 days a week if you want." "I cannot afford to pay anyone right now," Rebecca admitted reluctantly. Carmen waved this away. "We work that out later. Right now you need help, yes. This place is a mess." It was impossible to argue with that assessment. Rebecca agreed, and within an hour Carmen had transformed the house. She knew where everything was, which items were useful and which should be thrown out. She showed Rebecca how to prime the water pump behind the house, how to check the roof for scorpion nests, and which plants growing nearby were edible versus poisonous. "Your uncle was a good man," Carmen said as she scrubbed years of grime off the kitchen counter. "He gave my brother work when no one else would after he hurt his back in the mines, paid him fair, treated him with respect." "I wish I had known him," Rebecca said honestly. "He talked about his family sometimes, said he had a sister back east, but they did not speak anymore. Something about a fight many years ago." Carmen glanced at her. "He would be happy you came, I think, that the place stays in the family." Over the next several days, Rebecca began to understand the rhythm of life in this harsh landscape. Water was precious, heat was constant, and everything required more work than she had ever imagined. Carmen came by every other day, always bringing some small gift: fresh vegetables, a blanket, a set of curtains that would fit the bedroom window. Rebecca suspected she was being adopted as some kind of charity case, but she was too grateful to protest. She saw Lucas Nash several times, always from a distance. He would be riding his property line, checking fences or moving cattle, and he would raise a hand in greeting if he spotted her. She found herself watching for him, this tacit acknowledgement that she was not completely alone out here. On her 8th day in Hachita, Rebecca was struggling to repair a broken shutter when Lucas rode up, leading a second horse behind him. "You know how to ride," he called out. "Not really," Rebecca admitted. "Want to learn?" She climbed down from the rickety ladder she had been balancing on. "Why?" "Because walking everywhere in this territory will get you killed eventually. Snake bite, heat exhaustion, getting lost. You need to be able to cover ground quickly." He swung down from his horse, a beautiful bay gelding that looked like it could run forever. "This is Sage. She is old, patient, and gentle. She has been teaching ranch hands to ride for the past 10 years. The second horse was a gray mare with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. Rebecca approached slowly, holding out her hand the way she had seen others do. Sage snuffled at her palm, searching for treats. "I do not have anything for you," Rebecca said softly. "Sorry." "She will love you anyway," Lucas said. He pulled an apple from his saddlebag and handed it to Rebecca. "Here, give her this." Rebecca offered the apple, laughing as Sage's lips tickled her palm while taking the fruit. "She is beautiful, she is practical, which is more important out here." Lucas checked the cinch on Sage's saddle. "You up for a lesson?" They spent the next hour in the flat area behind Rebecca's house, with Lucas patiently teaching her the basics of mounting, sitting properly, and controlling the horse with gentle pressure from her legs and hands. Sage lived up to her reputation, tolerating Rebecca's awkward attempts with saintly patience. "You are doing better than most beginners," Lucas said after Rebecca managed to walk Sage in a complete circle without assistance. "You have got good balance." "I am terrified," Rebecca confessed. "But I do not want to look incompetent. Fear is healthy, keeps you cautious. Overconfidence is what gets people hurt." He demonstrated how to guide Sage into a trot, making it look effortless. "The key is to move with the horse, not fight against the motion." Rebecca tried, bouncing uncomfortably for several strides before finding something resembling rhythm. Her teeth rattled, and she gripped the saddle horn perhaps harder than necessary, but she stayed on. "Better," Lucas said. "Keep practicing that and we will work on longer rides next time." "Next time?" Rebecca pulled Sage to a stop, slightly breathless. "Figure you will need ongoing lessons, unless you want to walk to town every time you need supplies." He took Sage's reins. "I will leave her here with you. She needs some exercise anyway and my stable is full." "You would actually be doing me a favor." "I cannot accept a horse from you, Mr. Nash, Lucas, and you are not accepting it, you are borrowing it, indefinitely." He grinned, the expression transforming his usually serious face into something almost boyish. "Besides, Sage likes you. See how her ears are forward. That is happy horse language." Before Rebecca could formulate another protest, he was riding away, leaving Sage tied to the porch railing. She stared after him, confused and more than a little flustered. Lucas Nash was proving to be an enigma. He showed up unannounced, offered help without being asked, and left before she could properly thank him or refuse his generosity. Carmen arrived later that afternoon and nearly choked on her water when she saw the horse. "Lucas Nash gave you Sage." She set down her cup with exaggerated care. "Do you know what this means? That I can learn to ride? That Lucas Nash is interested in you?" Carmen's eyes sparkled with mischief. "That man does not give anything away lightly, especially not one of his favorite horses." "He said his stable was full," Rebecca protested, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "His stable is enormous. He has space for 20 horses easily." Carmen leaned forward conspiratorially. "Lucas has not courted anyone since Sarah Miller left town 3 years ago. Every single woman within 50 miles has tried to catch his attention. But he just works, takes care of his father, runs that ranch like it is the only thing that matters. And now he is teaching you to ride and lending you his horse. We barely know each other. That is how it starts." Carmen stood, gathering the cleaning supplies she had brought. "You should make him dinner, to thank him for his help." "I do not think that would be appropriate. This is not Philadelphia, Rebecca. Different rules out here. If you wait for everything to be proper and appropriate, you will die a lonely old woman." She paused at the door. "Besides, I saw how you watched him ride away. You are interested too." After Carmen left, Rebecca sat on the porch and forced herself to examine her feelings honestly. Lucas Nash was attractive, certainly. Tall and strong, with capable hands and an easy confidence in how he moved. But more than that, he treated her like she had a brain. He did not assume she was helpless or stupid. He offered help but did not insist on taking over. And yes, there was something appealing about the way he looked at her, like she was a puzzle he was trying to figure out. She was still thinking about it 3 days later when a dust storm rolled in from the west. Rebecca had been in town collecting supplies, riding Sage with only moderate terror, when the sky began to turn an ominous shade of brown. Other people on the street immediately started securing shutters and bringing items indoors. "Get home quick," the general store owner told her, helping load her purchases into saddlebags. "These storms can last hours. You do not want to be caught out in it." Rebecca urged Sage into the fastest pace she had managed yet, trusting the horse to find her way home through increasingly poor visibility. By the time they reached the house, the wind was howling, and sand scoured any exposed skin like thousands of tiny needles. She got Sage into the small stable, made sure the horse had water, and ran for the house. The storm hit with full force minutes later. Rebecca stuffed rags under the door and around the window frames, but dust still found its way inside, coating every surface with fine grit. The wind screamed around the corners of the house, and she prayed the roof would hold. She had reinforced it with Carmen's help just 2 days ago, but she was not confident in her carpentry skills. Hours passed. The storm showed no signs of letting up. Rebecca was considering trying to cook something when she heard pounding on the door, barely audible over the wind. "Rebecca, open up!" She yanked the door open, and Lucas stumbled inside, so covered in dust he looked like a ghost. She slammed the door shut behind him, throwing her weight against it until the latch caught. "What are you doing out in this?" she demanded, "making sure you were all right." He pulled off his bandana, revealing the only clean part of his face where it had protected his nose and mouth. "These storms can damage roofs, especially on older structures. Figured you might need help. You rode through a dust storm to check on me. I walked, actually. Could not see well enough to risk the horse." He looked around the dim interior. "You did a good job sealing things up. Some dust getting through, but that is unavoidable." "There is water in the bucket if you want to clean up," Rebecca offered, suddenly aware of how domestic this felt, the two of them alone in her small house during a storm. Lucas washed the worst of the dust from his face and hands, then helped himself to the coffee she had brewed earlier. They sat at the table, listening to the wind, and for a while neither spoke. "Can I ask you something?" Rebecca finally said. "Sure. Why are you being so kind to me? And please do not say it is because of my uncle. This has gone well beyond neighborly responsibility." Lucas turned his coffee cup slowly, considering his words. "Your uncle saved my youngest brother's life about 5 years back. Thomas was 14, thought he knew everything, went riding out into the desert without telling anyone. His horse threw him, and he broke his leg. Would have died of exposure if your uncle had not found him and brought him back. So yeah, partly I am helping because I owed Jeremiah Vance more than I could ever repay. And the other part," he looked at her directly, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "The other part is that you are interesting. You show up here with no experience, no skills for this kind of life, and instead of immediately selling and running back east, you stay. You learn, you work hard, you do not complain or expect special treatment." He took a sip of coffee. "That is rare, worth supporting." "I think you are giving me too much credit. I am barely surviving out here. You have been here less than 2 weeks, and you have already learned to ride, repair a roof, and properly seal a house against a dust storm. You will be fine." The storm continued into the night. Rebecca shared her modest supper with Lucas, dried beef and beans that Carmen had taught her to prepare. They talked about everything and nothing, His ranch, her life in Philadelphia, the challenges of making a living in the territory, books they had read. Rebecca discovered that Lucas was better educated than she had assumed, had spent 2 years at a college in California before his mother's death brought him home to help run the family ranch. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Coming back, giving up your own plans?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "But family is family. My father needed me and the ranch needed me. I could not turn my back on that. Not everyone would make that choice. Then not everyone understands what matters." He stood and walked to the window, peering through a crack in the shutters. "Storm is letting up. I should head back before they send out a search party." Rebecca felt a strange reluctance to see him leave. "Be careful, always am." He paused at the door, looking back at her. "You should come to dinner at the ranch sometime. Meet my family properly. My father would like that. He asks about you." "What does he ask?" "Whether you are planning to stay, whether you are adjusting all right, whether I have made you a fair offer for the property yet." Lucas grinned. "That last one annoys him. He thinks I am dragging my feet." "Are you, maybe?" He settled his hat on his head. "See you in a couple days, Rebecca." After he left, Rebecca cleaned up the supper dishes and prepared for bed, her mind spinning. Carmen was right. This was courtship, frontier style. No fancy parties or chaperoned outings, just practical help and honest conversation. And she found she liked it far more than she had enjoyed any of the stilted social interactions back in Philadelphia. The following week, Lucas taught her to shoot. He showed up one morning with a rifle and a revolver, set up targets behind her house, and spent hours demonstrating proper stance, aim, and trigger control. Rebecca discovered she had a decent eye, though the recoil of the weapons left her shoulder sore. "You need to be able to protect yourself," Lucas explained. "Snake, coyote, or worse, I am not always going to be around." "What is worse than a coyote?" Rebecca asked, reloading the revolver with his guidance. "Mountain lions. Bad men. Indians on the warpath, though that is rare these days. Mostly it is about peace of mind, knowing you can handle trouble if it comes." By the end of the lesson, Rebecca could hit a target reliably at 20 paces with the revolver and somewhat less reliably with the rifle. Lucas seemed satisfied with her progress. "Keep practicing. I will leave both guns with you and ammunition. Just be smart about it. Do not shoot unless you need to." That evening, Rebecca accepted his long-standing invitation to dinner at the Nash ranch. She wore her best dress, one of the few nice things she had brought from Philadelphia, and felt absurdly nervous as she rode Sage along the fence line to the main house. The Nash home was impressive up close, a sprawling structure that had clearly been added onto multiple times over the years. Lucas met her at the door, cleaned up and wearing what she suspected was his Sunday shirt. He looked almost nervous himself, which she found oddly endearing. "My father is excited to meet you," he said, helping her down from the horse. "Fair warning, he is going to ask inappropriate questions about your intentions. Just ignore him." "I will do my best." Inside, the house was warm and well-furnished, with the comfortable look of a place that had been lived in by multiple generations. A large stone fireplace dominated the main room, and family photographs covered one wall. Lucas led her to a dining room where an older man sat in a wheeled chair, his legs covered with a blanket. "Miss Vance, my father, Leonard Nash. Papa, this is Rebecca." Leonard Nash had the same blue eyes as his son, though his face was deeply lined and his hair completely gray. His handshake was strong despite his obvious infirmity. "Good to finally meet you, Miss Vance. Heard a lot about you from Carmen, from Sheriff Dalton, from my meddling son here who tries to pretend he is not smitten." "Papa," Lucas warned. "I am old and half-paralyzed, boy. I will say what I please." Leonard gestured to the chair beside him. "Sit, Miss Vance." Let us get to know each other properly. Dinner was a lively affair. Lucas's two younger brothers joined them. Thomas, who Rebecca recognized from Lucas's story about the rescue, now 19 and full of barely contained energy, and Samuel, a quiet 16-year-old who seemed more interested in his books than conversation. A housekeeper served an excellent meal of roasted chicken, vegetables, and fresh bread. Leonard asked about her life in Philadelphia, her uncle, her plans for the property. He was direct but not unkind, and Rebecca found herself relaxing under his straightforward questioning. "So, are you staying or selling?" Leonard asked as they finished dessert, a surprisingly good apple pie. "Papa, we agreed you would not pressure her," Lucas interjected. "I am not pressuring, I am asking. There is a difference." Leonard fixed Rebecca with an assessing look. "You have had offers, I imagine." "Actually, no. Other than Lucas mentioning he would be interested, no one has approached me." "That is because Lucas told everyone in town he would personally ruin them if they tried to cheat you or pressure you into a quick sale," Thomas said cheerfully. Caused quite a stir at the saloon. Lucas shot his brother a withering look. "Thank you, Thomas. Very helpful." Rebecca turned to Lucas. "You did that?" "Might have mentioned something along those lines," Lucas muttered. "He threatened to break David Morrison's jaw," Samuel added without looking up from his pie. "Morrison was telling everyone he planned to offer you half what the property was worth. Figure you did not know any better." "Samuel, you are not helping," Lucas said. Leonard laughed, a deep booming sound. "My boys are traitors, apparently. But yes, Lucas made it clear you were under his protection, so to speak. Most folks around here know better than to cross him." Rebecca did not know how to feel about this revelation. Part of her appreciated Lucas protecting her from predatory offers. Another part bristled at the implication that she could not handle her own business affairs. "I can take care of myself," she said quietly. "Never said you could not," Lucas replied, meeting her gaze. "But that does not mean you should have to fight off vultures alone. Not when I can make them back off with a few words." After dinner, Lucas walked her back to her horse. The evening had cooled considerably, and stars filled the sky in a breathtaking display. Rebecca tilted her head back, marveling at the sheer number of them. "You cannot see stars like this in the city," she murmured. "One of the things I love about this place. No matter how hard the day was, the sky reminds you there is something bigger than your immediate problems." Lucas stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "My mother used to say the stars were all the dreams people had, hanging up there waiting to be reached. That is beautiful. She was a romantic. Drove my practical father crazy sometimes, but he loved her for it." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, then Lucas said, "I need to tell you something." Rebecca's heart began to beat faster. "All right. I am not just helping you because I owed your uncle or because you are a good neighbor. I think you have figured that out by now." He turned to face her fully. "I am helping you because I am interested in you, as more than a neighbor. And before this goes any further, you need to know that, so you can tell me to back off if that is not what you want." Rebecca felt like all the air had left her lungs. She had suspected, but having it stated so directly was something else entirely. "I am not sure what to say." "You do not have to say anything right now. Just think about it. If you want me to keep my distance, I will. No hard feelings, and I will still help you however you need." His eyes searched hers in the starlight. "But if there is any chance you might be interested too, I would like to pursue this properly. Court you, see where it goes." "I have never been courted," Rebecca said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "Not really. There was a man in Philadelphia who called on me a few times, but it always felt like a business transaction. His mother approved of my connections, and my landlady thought he was a good prospect. We never actually talked about anything that mattered. So I have no competition." Lucas said it lightly, but she could hear the underlying seriousness. "No competition," Rebecca confirmed. "But I do not know how to do this, Lucas. I do not know the rules here, and I am afraid of making a fool of myself." "There are no rules. Or if there are, we will figure them out together." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was calloused from work, warm and solid. "How about we start simple? I will keep teaching you what you need to know to survive out here. We will have dinner sometimes, talk, spend time together. No pressure, no expectations, just see how we get along." "I think I would like that," Rebecca said softly. He squeezed her hand gently, then released it. "Good. Now get home before it is too late, and Rebecca, carry that revolver I gave you just in case." Over the next month, Rebecca fell into a new rhythm. She worked on improving her property, with Carmen's help and occasional assistance from Thomas, who seemed to enjoy having an excuse to avoid his own chores. She practiced riding until she felt comfortable at a gallop. She learned to identify animal tracks, to predict weather changes, to preserve food in the brutal heat. The desert that had seemed so hostile began to reveal its beauty. Spectacular sunsets, the unexpected bloom of wildflowers after a rain, the stark majesty of the mountains. And through it all, there was Lucas. He showed up regularly, sometimes with a specific purpose, sometimes just to talk. They rode together, checking her property lines and discussing which areas might support a small herd of cattle. He taught her to read the sky for rain, to find water in unlikely places, to understand the rhythms of the seasons in this harsh land. But they also talked about other things. Books and music and dreams deferred. Lucas confessed that he had wanted to study engineering, to build things that would last. Rebecca admitted that her writing had been her escape, a way to experience adventure from the safety of her room. He asked to read her work, and she reluctantly showed him one of her published stories, bracing for mockery. Instead, he read it carefully, then looked up with surprise. "This is good. Really good. Why did you stop?" "I did not stop. I just cannot publish from here. The magazines I wrote for are all in New York and Philadelphia. So send them stories from here. About the frontier. People back east love reading about the Wild West. Usually it is nonsense written by people who have never been within 1,000 miles of actual frontier life. But you are living it now. You could write the real version." The idea had not occurred to her, but once Lucas planted it, she could not stop thinking about it. She began writing again, observations and character sketches and small moments of drama. It felt good to have that creative outlet again. 6 weeks after Rebecca arrived in Hachita, a crisis erupted. One of the smaller ranchers south of town, a man named Jenkins, accused the Nash ranch of stealing his water by diverting a stream. Sheriff Dalton called a town meeting to mediate the dispute, and tensions ran high. Jenkins had several friends backing him up, all armed, all angry. Rebecca attended the meeting at Lucas's request. "I might need a voice of reason," he had said. "Jenkins is not thinking straight, and this could get ugly." The meeting took place in the saloon, the only building large enough to hold everyone. Jenkins stood on one side with his allies, while Lucas, his father in the wheeled chair, and several Nash ranch hands occupied the other. Dalton tried to keep order, but accusations flew back and forth. "You dammed up the creek," Jenkins shouted. "My cattle are dying because you are stealing water that should be shared." "We have not touched the creek," Lucas responded, his voice calm but firm. "The flow is down because we have not had good rain in 2 months. Everyone's water is low." "Liar. I saw your men working up by the North Fork just last week. We were clearing debris from a flash flood. If anything, that should have improved the flow. Lucas pulled out a map and spread it on the bar. Look, the creek runs through your property, then through the old Miller place, then reaches our southern boundary. If we dammed it, Miller would complain first. Miller sold out and left, Jenkins said stubbornly, which is why no one noticed the problem until now. Rebecca spoke up, surprising herself as much as everyone else. All eyes turned to her. She swallowed nervously but continued. I rode past the old Miller place a few days ago. There is debris blocking the creek, big piles of it. Looked like a beaver dam, actually. If no one has been maintaining that stretch, the water is probably backing up or diverting into the ground. Dalton latched onto this. That makes sense. Jenkins, when is the last time you rode the full length of the creek? Jenkins hesitated. Been a few weeks. I have been short-handed since my boys went to work the mines. So let us ride out there right now, all of us, and see what the actual problem is, Dalton suggested. Beats shooting each other over a misunderstanding. Reluctantly, Jenkins agreed. A group of them rode out to the old Miller place, and sure enough, Rebecca's observation proved correct. A large beaver dam had formed where the creek narrowed, backing up water into a marshy area that was slowly seeping into the ground. No water was making it past the blockage. I will be damned, Jenkins said quietly. I am sorry, Nash. I thought sure you were cheating me. Easy mistake, Lucas said, though Rebecca could see the tension in his shoulders. This could have gone very differently. Let us break up this dam and get the water flowing again. Working together, the group of men dismantled the beaver dam. Water began flowing freely again within an hour. Jenkins shook Lucas's hand, apologizing again, and the crisis ended as quickly as it had begun. As they rode back toward town, Lucas pulled his horse alongside Rebecca's. That was quick thinking back there. How did you know about the beaver dam? I did not for certain. But I have been reading a book about frontier wildlife that I bought at the general store, and it mentioned how beavers can disrupt water flow. When Jenkins said Miller had left, it just made sense that no one would have been monitoring that stretch. She smiled. Plus, I have learned that sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one. You probably prevented a range war. Lucas's expression was serious. Jenkins was spoiling for a fight. If this had gone differently, people would have died. That night, Lucas asked Rebecca to go for a walk with him. They strolled along the creek near her property, the moon bright enough to see by. The air had cooled and the sound of water over stones was peaceful. I have been thinking about something, Lucas said. About us. Rebecca's heart began to race. What about us? We have been spending a lot of time together, and I think I have been pretty clear about my intentions, but I realized I do not actually know how you feel. If I am just a friend helping you out or if this is something more for you too. Rebecca stopped walking and turned to face him. It is more, I think you know that, maybe, but I would like to hear you say it. She took a breath, gathering her courage. I care about you, Lucas. More than I expected to, honestly. When I first came here, I was just trying to survive, to figure out my next move. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being temporary in my mind. This place, these people, it started feeling like home. Is that a good thing? I think so. It terrifies me a little. I have never felt this way about anyone before. Lucas stepped closer, and Rebecca could see every detail of his face in the moonlight. I feel the same way. Like I've been waiting for something without knowing what it was. And then you showed up covered in dust and determined to make a go of it in the middle of nowhere. And suddenly, everything made sense. That might be the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me, Rebecca said, her voice catching slightly. Yeah. He reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Well, I am just getting started. Lucas, she whispered. Tell me something, Rebecca. Have you ever been kissed? The question hung between them, intimate and vulnerable. Rebecca felt her cheeks flush. No, never. There was never anyone I wanted to kiss, and the men who might have wanted to kiss me never bothered to ask. They just assumed I would reject them. Would you have? Probably. And now? His thumb traced her jawline softly. If I asked right here, right now, would you reject me? Her heart hammered so hard she was certain he could hear it. No. Then let me be your first, Lucas said softly. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, to change her mind. Rebecca tilted her face up to meet him, her eyes closing as his lips touched hers. The kiss was gentle, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. His hand cupped her face, and she gripped his shirt, needing something to anchor her as the world seemed to tilt. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Rebecca opened her eyes to find Lucas looking at her with an expression of such tenderness it made her chest ache. Was that all right? He asked. It was perfect, Rebecca said honestly. Can we do it again? He laughed and obliged, pulling her closer this time. This kiss was deeper, more confident, and Rebecca felt something unfurl inside her, something warm and bright and full of possibility. When they finally broke apart, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. I am in love with you, he said simply. In case that was not clear. I am in love with you too, Rebecca replied. It is probably too soon and we should be more sensible about this, but I do not care. I love you, Lucas Nash. They stood there by the creek, holding each other, and Rebecca felt a certainty she had never experienced before. This was right. This was where she was meant to be. The next few months passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Lucas proposed properly, with a simple gold ring that had belonged to his grandmother. Rebecca accepted without hesitation. They set a wedding date for October, when the worst of the heat would have passed. Rebecca continued improving her property with an eye toward the future. Lucas helped her plan where to build a larger house, one where they could raise a family. They talked about combining the properties eventually, creating one large ranch that would be sustainable for generations. Leonard Nash welcomed Rebecca into the family with enthusiasm, treating her like the daughter he had never had. Thomas and Samuel became the younger brothers she had never expected. And Carmen, when she learned of the engagement, hugged Rebecca so hard it hurt and immediately began planning the wedding feast. The wedding itself was a simple affair at the small church in Hachita. Rebecca wore a dress that Carmen and several other women from town had helped her sew, white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Lucas wore a new suit, ordered specially from Santa Fe, and looked uncomfortable but handsome. Sheriff Dalton gave Rebecca away, since she had no family present. Nearly the entire town attended, packed into the small church and spilling out into the yard. A young circuit preacher performed the ceremony, his voice carrying over the crowd as he spoke about love and commitment and building a life together in challenging times. When Lucas kissed her as his wife, Rebecca felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Happy tears, the kind she had not known were possible. This was her family now. These people, this place, this man who had seen her potential when she could barely see it herself. The celebration lasted long into the night. Someone produced a fiddle, and dancing broke out in the street. Food appeared from every household, a potluck feast that groaned under the weight of dishes, both familiar and new to Rebecca. Lucas whirled her around in an impromptu waltz, both of them laughing, and Rebecca thought her heart might burst from sheer joy. Later, alone in the house Lucas had prepared for them on the Nash ranch, he carried her over the threshold and set her down gently in the main room. A fire crackled in the fireplace and flowers filled every available surface. "Did you do all this?" Rebecca asked, turning in a slow circle. Had some help from Carmen and Mrs. Patterson. But yes, I wanted it to be special. He took her hands. I want everything to be special for you, Rebecca. You took a chance on me, on this life. I intend to spend every day making sure you do not regret it. I could never regret this, she said, pulling him close. You gave me a home, Lucas. Not just a house or a place, but a real home. With people who care about me, work that matters, and a future I actually want. That is everything. Their first night together was tender and sweet, a discovery of each other that felt both momentous and perfectly natural. Rebecca had been nervous, her only knowledge coming from vague hints and one mortifying conversation with Carmen. But Lucas was patient and gentle, making sure she felt safe and cherished. By the time dawn light began filtering through the curtains, Rebecca understood what all the fuss was about. They settled into married life with surprising ease. Rebecca had worried about losing her independence, about being subsumed into Lucas's world, but he made space for her interests and ambitions. When she sold her first story about frontier life to a magazine in New York, he was more excited than she was, showing the publication to everyone who would look at it. The combined ranch prospered. Rebecca had a good eye for business, and she implemented several innovations that improved efficiency and profit margins. She started a small garden operation, growing vegetables that supplemented their diet and provided surplus to sell in town. She worked with Carmen to establish a regular trading relationship with several Mexican families across the border, exchanging goods in a way that benefited everyone. Lucas's father, Leonard, slowly regained some mobility with Rebecca's encouragement. She had read about new therapeutic approaches in one of her magazines and convinced him to try exercises that strengthened his legs. He would never walk unaided again, but he could stand for short periods, which restored his dignity and lifted his spirits considerably. Thomas, under Rebecca's gentle guidance, discovered a talent for horse breeding. He began a program to develop horses suited specifically to the harsh desert environment, combining stamina with intelligence. Within a year, his horses were in demand throughout the territory. Samuel, the quiet, bookish one, found an ally in Rebecca. She encouraged his education, ordering books from back east and helping him study for the entrance exams to college. When he was accepted to study medicine in San Francisco, Lucas was initially resistant, not wanting to lose another brother. But Rebecca talked him through it, reminding him of his own abbreviated education and how important it was to let people follow their dreams. 2 years after their wedding, Rebecca gave birth to their first child, a son they named Nathan. The pregnancy had been difficult and the birth frightening, with only Carmen and the town doctor in attendance. But when Rebecca held her baby for the first time, saw Lucas's face as he cradled his son, every moment of fear dissolved into pure love. Nathan was followed by a daughter, Emma, 16 months later, then another son, James, 2 years after that. The house expanded to accommodate the growing family, with Lucas building additions as needed. The property rang with the sounds of children playing, of life being lived fully. Rebecca continued writing, now balancing motherhood with her creative work. She published regularly, her stories finding an eager audience. She wrote about strong women making lives on the frontier, about the challenges and beauty of the landscape, about love finding a way despite impossible odds. Her work resonated, and she developed a following. Lucas remained the steady center of her world. He was a devoted father, patient with the children in a way that melted her heart. He still looked at her like she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. And when they curled up together at night, children finally asleep and the day's work done, she felt a contentment so complete it sometimes frightened her. 5 years into their marriage, On a warm spring evening, Rebecca stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. Lucas came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different my life is from what I imagined. How much better." She leaned back against him. 5 years ago, I was alone and desperate, arriving in a town I had never heard of to claim property I had never seen. I was terrified. You did not look terrified. You looked determined. I was good at hiding it. She turned in his arms to face him. "But then you showed up at my door with food and firewood, and you kept showing up. You taught me everything I needed to know. You made me believe I could do this. You did it yourself. I just pointed you in the right direction." "We did it together," Rebecca corrected. "That is what I love most about us. We are partners. In the work, in raising our children, in everything. You have never treated me like I was less than you, or like my ideas did not matter. Because you are not less than me, and your ideas usually are better than mine." He kissed her softly. "You made my life better too, you know. Before you, I was just going through the motions. Work, family obligation, routine. But you brought color and possibility. You made me remember what it was like to be excited about the future." Nathan called from inside the house, probably arguing with Emma over something inconsequential. Rebecca sighed. "Duty calls. Let them work it out," Lucas suggested. "They need to learn to solve problems themselves." "Spoken like someone who did not give birth to them," Rebecca teased. But she stayed in his arms a moment longer, savoring the peace. Over the next decade, the Nash Ranch became one of the most successful operations in southern New Mexico territory. Thomas's horse breeding program gained fame throughout the region. Emma showed a talent for numbers and began helping manage the ranch's finances at age 12. Nathan developed his grandfather's engineering interest and designed an innovative irrigation system that increased their crop yields. James, the youngest, was still finding his way, but showed signs of having his mother's creative talent. Leonard Nash passed away peacefully in his sleep at age 78, surrounded by family. The entire town attended his funeral, a testament to the respect he had earned. Rebecca held Lucas that night while he grieved, offering the same steady support he had always given her. Carmen became Rebecca's closest friend, their children growing up together. She eventually married a widower from town, a carpenter named Miguel, and moved to a house just down the road. The two families celebrated holidays together, their lives intertwined in the way frontier communities created chosen family. Rebecca's writing career flourished. She published 2 novels based on her experiences, both of which sold well enough that she received regular royalty checks. She used the money to establish a small library in Hachita, the first in the region, and to fund scholarships for young people who wanted to pursue education but lacked resources. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Lucas surprised Rebecca with a trip. He arranged for Carmen and Miguel to watch the children and took Rebecca on a journey to San Francisco, where they visited Samuel, now a successful doctor with his own practice. They spent 2 weeks exploring the city, attending theater performances, dining in fancy restaurants, and staying in a hotel that seemed impossibly luxurious after years of frontier life. But what Rebecca remembered most from that trip was one quiet evening when they walked along the waterfront, watching ships come and go in the harbor. Lucas stopped and turned to her, taking both her hands. "I have been thinking about that first night you stayed in your uncle's house. When I brought you supplies during the dust storm." He smiled at the memory. "You were so stubborn, insisting you could handle everything yourself. I knew right then you were different from anyone I had ever met." "I was terrified and trying desperately not to show it," Rebecca admitted. "I know." I could see it in your eyes under all that determination." He pulled her closer. "But you stayed anyway. You fought for what was yours. And somewhere in those early weeks, I realized I was fighting for you, fighting to be worthy of you, to make you want to stay, to build something together. You never had to fight for me, Lucas. I was yours from the moment you kissed me by the creek." She touched his face gently. "When I whispered that I had never been kissed, and you replied that you wanted to be my first, I felt something shift inside me. Like everything in my life had been leading to that moment. No regrets, not a single one. You gave me everything I did not even know I wanted. A home, a family, a purpose, and love. So much love that sometimes I do not know how to contain it all." They kissed there on the waterfront, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that exceeded both their expectations. When they finally pulled apart, Lucas was grinning. "Let us go back to the hotel," he suggested. "We have 2 more days before we have to return to reality, and I intend to make the most of them." Rebecca laughed and let him lead her back through the city streets, their fingers intertwined, their future stretching out bright and limitless ahead of them. The years continued to pass, marked by the ordinary miracles of life. Children grew into adults with their own dreams and ambitions. Nathan went to study engineering in Denver, then returned to help modernize the ranch's operations. Emma married a lawyer from Santa Fe and divided her time between 2 worlds, bringing her children to visit every summer. James became a teacher, opening a school in Hachita that served children from across the region. Rebecca's hair began to show streaks of silver, which Lucas claimed made her look distinguished. His face developed deeper lines, especially around his eyes from a lifetime of squinting against the desert sun. But when he looked at her, she still saw the young rancher who had shown up at her door with supplies and kindness, who had patiently taught her everything she needed to survive and thrive. On the morning of their 30th wedding anniversary, Rebecca woke to find Lucas already awake, watching her with that familiar expression of wonder that still, after all these years, made her heart skip. "Good morning," she murmured, stretching. "Best morning," he corrected, pulling her close. "Because I get to wake up next to you, just like I have for 30 years and hopefully 30 more." "That would make us very old," Rebecca pointed out. "Do not care. I will take every day I can get with you." He kissed her forehead. "I have something for you, an anniversary present." "We agreed no presents this year. We are saving for Nathan's wedding. This did not cost anything. Well, not money anyway." He climbed out of bed and retrieved a wooden box from the bureau. "Open it." Inside, Rebecca found a stack of papers covered in Lucas's distinctive handwriting. She pulled out the top page and began to read, quickly realizing it was a story. A love story about a rancher who fell in love with a woman from back east, about learning to trust and build a life together. "You wrote this?" she asked, amazed. "You are not the only one who can tell a story. Though mine is not nearly as polished as yours." He sat beside her on the bed. "I wanted to write down what I remember about how we started, so our grandchildren will know the story. How their grandmother arrived in a dusty little town with nothing but determination, and how she changed everything." Rebecca felt tears prickling her eyes as she continued reading. Lucas had captured moments she had almost forgotten. The first riding lesson, the dust storm, the confrontation with Jenkins, the night by the creek where everything changed. His perspective was different from hers, revealing feelings and thoughts he had never fully articulated before. "This is beautiful," she whispered. "The most wonderful gift you have ever given me." "You are the wonderful gift," Lucas said. "Everything good in my life came from the day you decided to stay, to take a chance on this place and on me. I just wanted you to know that I remember. Every moment, every conversation, Every time you made me laugh or think or feel more alive than I ever had before." She set the papers aside carefully and pulled him into a kiss that conveyed everything words could not. After 30 years, they still discovered new depths to their love, new ways to appreciate each other. The anniversary celebration that evening was a grand affair. All their children returned for the occasion, along with grandchildren ranging from infants to teenagers. Friends from across the region attended, filling the ranch house and spilling out onto the grounds. Tables groaned under the weight of food, and music filled the air as someone produced a guitar. Rebecca stood with Lucas, watching their family and friends celebrate, and felt overwhelmed by gratitude. This life she had built, this family she had created, all grew from a single desperate journey to a place she had never heard of. If someone had told her, that dusty, terrified young woman, that she would find such happiness here, she never would have believed it. "What are you thinking?" Lucas asked, reading her expression the way he always could. "That I am the luckiest woman alive. That everything I have, everything we have built together, started because I was brave enough to whisper the truth about never being kissed, and you were generous enough to want to be my first. And last," Lucas added, pulling her close for a kiss that drew cheers and applause from their assembled family. "Always and only yours." As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Rebecca Vance Nash looked at the life she had created and knew with absolute certainty that every challenge, every moment of fear or doubt had been worth it. She had found her place, her people, and her purpose. And she had found a love that would endure through all the years to come, constant as the desert stars, and as beautiful as the land that had claimed her heart. Their grandchildren would later tell the story of how their grandparents met, about the woman from Philadelphia and the rancher who taught her to survive. But the heart of the story was always the same. A simple confession by a creek under the moonlight, a gentle kiss that changed two lives forever, and the love that grew from that single perfect moment into something neither of them could have imagined. Rebecca and Lucas Nash remained together for another 23 years, their love deepening with each season. When Lucas passed away at 81, Rebecca held his hand and whispered the same words she had spoken so many years before by the creek. "I love you. Forever." He squeezed her fingers weakly and smiled, his last breath a contented sigh. Rebecca followed him 3 years later, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Her last words were about the day she arrived in Hachita, about the rancher who had changed her life with his kindness and persistence. "Best decision I ever made," she murmured. "Staying, loving him, all of it." They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath the vast New Mexico sky they had both loved. Their gravestone bore a simple inscription: "Rebecca and Lucas Nash. They built a life together." But those who knew their story understood what those simple words encompassed: courage and determination, patience and passion, and a love that had transformed two lonely people into partners who built something that would endure for generations. The ranch continued to thrive under their descendants' care. The library Rebecca established still served the community, expanded now but bearing her name. The stories she wrote remained in print, introducing new generations to the challenges and beauty of frontier life. And the Nash family continued to grow, each generation adding their own chapter to a story that began with a woman desperate for a new beginning, and a man generous enough to help her find it. In Hachita, people still told the story of Rebecca Vance, the writer from Philadelphia who became one of them. They spoke of her intelligence and determination, her kindness and creativity. But most of all, they remembered how she and Lucas Nash had loved each other, a love so strong and true that it became legend. Their story reminded everyone that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single leap of faith, that home is not always where you start but where you choose to stay, and that love, when it is real and right, can transform everything. From a dusty arrival in an unknown town to a kiss by a moonlit creek, from first love to lasting devotion, Rebecca and Lucas proved that the best stories are the ones we live, the ones we build one day at a time with the person who makes every moment worth remembering. The creek still flows where Lucas first kissed Rebecca, unchanged by the years. The stars still fill the night sky with impossible beauty. And in the house that began as her uncle's simple adobe structure and grew into the heart of a thriving ranch, new generations of the Nash family still gather, still share stories, and still marvel at how one woman's courage and one man's heart created a legacy of love that would never fade.